Page number 25. Open page number 25, please.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any one of you read the paragraph, first paragraph? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any one of you read first paragraph?
Page number 25.
Yeah, page number 25.
In that page, materialism and anti-materialism is there, sir.
No, this one is lyric. The lyric.
Page number 33, sir.
The lyric. You start the lyric.
Lyric verse, as the name implies, was the verse originally sung to the lyre when birds and minstrels sang and played the songs that they composed. It is the oldest type of verse and most natural, spontaneous, simple. It has a priority over all competing forms of poetry. It has significant features of high order its own soul. It has not many qualities of the epic, moral sublimity, and vastness of outlook qualities, intensity of the dramatic life, and general science effects. Lyric poet tends to be musical and suits to music very well. It's one of the characteristics being musicality. However, the meaning of lyric has been changed with the passage of time and no longer means music. Rather, lyric poetry is now largely means of for reading. This is the first paragraph.
Yeah. So here in our poetry we have different types. One among them is the lyric, ode, ballad, sonnet, epic. As we all know that how poetry is into different types. Similarly, here we have one of the types of lyric. It was, a song originally that was sung to the accompaniment of a lyre. A lyre is a musical instrument similarly to the harp used commonly in ancient Greek. Ancient Greek writers defined the lyric as a song. So here, lyric means what? A song. Okay. So here, when you look at the poem with this kind of a song, and here you can see that it is usually brief and does not exceed 60 lines. It reveals the emotions and thoughts of the poet in a personal manner. Often it could be the expression of a persona other than the poet. So here you can see that how the poetic genius and the creativity is making sense of our poem, that is lyric. Lyric means what? A song, accompaniment of a lyre. If you look at the way how a poem is in a song form and it is not more than 60 lines and it reveals the emotions and thoughts of the poet in a personal manner. The Greek song was divided into two groups. The first was sung by one person and it was accompanied by a lyre. So here you see that how this poem is divided into two groups. One song by one person and the other one is accompanied by a lyre. The second was the choric song, which involved group singing, and this was accompanied by instrument music and sometimes also by dance. So here in a poem, you can see that how it is divided into two, parts. One is, a person who's going to sing a song and there will be a chorus and it will be with the musical instrument. So like that, here we have that musical instrument and sometimes also by dance So here the English lyric is in its present form was influenced by you know the first form of a single feeling and its communication in a musical composition. So here we have seen that how the poetry is into different forms, and here the lyric is into this kind of two types. One is by the poet or a person, and then it is accompanied by the other people, and there will be an instrument. So like that, here you have all these into the uh, lyric. The term is now applied to any brief non-narrative poem with only one speaker. So here we have a single speaker in its presentation. The speaker exposes his thought or emotion. So here when you look at any form of literature, there you can see emotions and how it exposes of the persona in its expression. It could be a subject in contemplation by himself, although he could be conversing with somebody else in a dramatic lyric. So here, John Donne's canonization, Wordsworth's Tintin Abbey, and here, first person is I employed, but it is possible that the thought and emotions need not be of the speaker always. When Milton states the following line, when I consider how my light is spent. So here, the way to look at the poem into this kind of emotional feelings expression in its theoretical framework by a person, there you can see that self exaltation with the understanding of the subjectivity of the thought provoking ideas. Here you can see the poet's life. Hello.
Yes, sir.
I think is it audible?
Yes, sir.
No, lot of disturbance is there, it seems. No, please
Someone
couple
was
of
unmuted, sir.
students. Yeah, please mute all the participants of this class,
Ramarao garu.
online class.
Ramarao sir, it seems.
Yeah,
Ramarao
please,
Tumalapalli.
sir Ramarao sir. Yeah, please mute your device, sir. Okay, so you have seen that how lyric is in the form of e- expose of the human thoughts with that theoretical framework. We have the here we have the Elizabethan age was popular for the skill of rendering language into a musical piece, and the quality of the lyric was unequaled for the sheer harmony and verbal melody. So here poetry does not mean only spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. It includes that kind of language into musical piece and harmony and verbal melody. Look at here, the poetry is with this kind of music to express its feeling rhythmically. Look at the stanza from Tennyson's has been acclaimed for its world music. Oh hark, oh hark, how thin and clear, and thinner, clearer, further going. Oh sweet and far from cliff and scad, the horns of Elfland faintly blowing. A lyrical poem is often an articulation of a feeling or concept. It can also reveal emotions, as in Shelley's Ode to West Wind. So here, a lyrical poem is making sense of the thought-provoking ideas of the persona. Here, persona does not mean that any person. The poet is trying to have that kind of self-exaltation. For instance, if you look at P.B. Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, Oh, lift me as a wave, as a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of my life. I bleed. In this poem, the poet Parsana appeals to the west wind that I myself, with this kind of feeling, that to appeal with you. My emotional feelings are all, into the self exaltation that here it reminds that be thou spirit fires, my spirit be thou me, impetus one, drive my dead thoughts over the universe like withered leaves to striken a new birth. O wind, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? So here, when you look at that, the emphasis of I, Varsana, always tries to look at that self-exaltation with the emotional feelings that here in this poem of Ode to West Wind by P.B. Shelley, the poetess reminds that his status and how he appeals to the west wind to lift him as a wave, as a leaf, a cloud, because he fall upon the thorns of his life. I bleed. So he says that he is helplessness, and he emphasizes that he should be, with that kind of wind. And here he consoles himself that how poetry is nothing but criticism of our life. It interprets us, it sustains us, and it consoles us. So look at the poem with this kind of self realization, and the persona always tries to emphasize that I myself, with this kind of status of helplessness. So here he appeals to nature or something else. There you see that the lyric form with this kind of whatever its emotional expression. Keats' famous odes are packed with fine lyrical qualities. Here we have Grecian on, and then you can see Edgar Allan Poe's American poet, and here you will see that the way how the poets are with this kind of lyrical form in English of that contemporary age. So when you look at all these, then you can understand how the lyric form is into its whatever the emotional expression with the music and the way to understand its thematic rhythmic concerns. Here you see that the degree of excitement which would entitle a poem to be so called at all cannot be sustained through a composition of any great length. According to the definition given by Palgrave in the preface to his Golden Treasury, the term lyric usually denotes the song, the ode, the sonnet, and other similar poetic forms. So here you have seen that how poetry has been defined by different poets and poetess. Similarly, here lyric means nothing but a song, the ode, the sonnet. Lyric can be divided into three components. So here earlier we have seen two, and now here we have three, which convey the three moods a poet experiences when he is emotionally inspired. The first, which consists of the first few lines, or a stanza expresses the feelings or the subject that has set the imagination at work. So look at here the poem with this kind of status of mind of the persona. So when you look at the first portion of the lyric form with its whatever the imagination at work, and the second is a major part of the poem displays the thoughts which have been aroused by the emotion of the poem and which are seeking expression through the lyric. So here you have seen that how the first expression of the stanza is with that kind of subject and imagination. The second one is with that kind of thoughts which have been aroused by the emotion. Third one is including lines which bring the poet back to his initial mood. So here when you look at the form of the lyric with this kind of different portions of its expression with that kind of whatever the imagination subject, how it emerged, and how it concludes with the coherence of the first portion of the stanza. As you know that sonnet is with this kind of whatever the question and its relevance in its conclusion with the answer. So as we all know that the poetry of any age is with this kind of rhythmic in its expression, and here the lyric is with this kind of whatever the components of its whatever the expressions of imagination and thought-provoking ideas and its conclusion. So each and every portion of the lyric shows that how it is into this kind of whatever the poetic genius and the creativity of its expression. In Hendrik lyric, to blossom, these components are clearly evident. The first two lines expresses the theme, which is sorrow at the transient life of the flower on a tree. Here you look at the way how lyric is into this kind of the first and second and third, and how it is rhythmically follows whatever its coherence to conclude the lyric of that whatever the emotional feelings into the imagination. So here the Roman lyricists were more personal in the use of the lyric and utilized the Aeolian variety of lyrics. So here we have seen.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, yeah.
Sir, please tell me once again what are the main key components of the lyric?
Okay, right. So here first write down that the first component is with that expression of feelings or subject. Expression of feelings or subject. Okay, first, and it is the inclusiveness of the imagination. Feelings expressed with the imagination. Okay, the second one is aroused by the emotion of the poem, which have been aroused, the thoughts. The second portion displays the thoughts aroused by the emotion of the poem. Second part deals with that kind of the whatever the thought-provoking ideas, how it emerged from that kind of emotional background. So here you see that the first portion is the expression of feelings with the imagination. Second portion is with this kind of whatever the emotional background of that expression. Third one, it is a final part, is as brief as the first. So it is concludes that the poet back to his initial mood. So here you see that strophe and antistrophe. That means if you look at an S, how it starts, from top to right, from left, and then it takes U-turn, and then it takes U-turn, and here it concludes. So look at that how strophe and antistrophe, and here in the third portion it comes to the initial stage. Look at the way how three parts are with this kind of coherence. The first is expression of imagination, and the second is emotional background to that imagination, and the third is conclusion with the initial status of the personas, whatever the expression, or it is with that kind of initial mood. So look at the first, second, and third are all with this kind of whatever it's essentially a mood of analysis. In this lyric, you can see that how the use of the language, images, and the way how it concludes with the initial mood of the poet. So with this, you can see how the persona will express his feelings into this kind of coherence of the first, second, and third portions of its expression. So when you look at Wordsworth as well as Keats, and then you can see P.B. Shelley's poetry with this kind of lyrical, status of mind. Now you can understand that how lyric is with this kind of, it's a literary background, and you can see that how all the poets had tried to express their feelings through the imagination and the background to the emotions. And here you can understand how the poets have been making sense of the poetic genius and creativity with this kind of lyric poem with the whatever the musical instrument as well as its coherence and the way how the persona makes sense of the use of the language. So like that here you can see how the lyric is into this kind of status of mind of our whatever the hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir, yes, yes.
Sir,
Yeah.
we can
So, is it
Yes,
clear
sir.
about the about is it clear about the lyric?
Okay, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you.
please. Yeah. So please, go through these, whatever the lyric is there, so that you can understand how the lyric with this kind of status of mind and how
Hello, sir.
it expresses the feelings of human
Sir,
thought. Yes.
sir, can you explain the origin of lyric?
Yeah. I already told it seems no.
Can you please repeat it once?
Okay, so here you will see that way back to centuries, we have the that kind of background of the Greek writers as well as that whatever the concerns of the literature of that age has been making sense of that whatever the origin and development of the lyric and the way how here the lyric has been changing its expression through the whatever the emotions and the and its whatever the concerns of its. So here look at the Roman lyricists were more personal, and here you can understand the way how the lyric was emerged in 7th century BC, and two categories of personal lyric flourished during this period. The first of these was the Aeolian or personal lyric written by Sappho and Alcaeus, and the second was Dorian or objective lyric written by writers like Arion and Ibicus. So here you have seen that way back to centuries, Greeks, Latin, and here you can see that the 7th century is the beginning of the lyric form, and how it was subjective and objective, and how the 5th century BC has that kind of lyric poetry written by Pindar, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. They excelled in the production of different lyrical forms such as choral odes, dance song, the dirge, and the hymn. So here you look at the way how the lyric poem is into this kind of background of the 7th century BC, and then way back to centuries how it has been making sense of its lyrical expression with the song, music, and how it has that kind of emotional background to emerge as a song to have the status of mind of the poetess. So the early church lyrics were expressed in the form of hymns based on Hebrew slaughter. So here you see that how the Latin of lyric of the Middle Ages, and then Greeks and the 7th century, and then here each and every age contributes to our literature to say that how the contemporary society influences the literature and its genres. So similarly here, way back to centuries, we have seen that the influence of the Greeks, Latin, and then you can see that the way how the lyricists have been emerging to have that kind of whatever the lyric with this kind of music as well as expression, then you can see how the lyric had the kind of whatever the origin of its literary background. So when you look at all these, then you can understand how it has that kind of whatever the its background. The great Italian writer Petrarch and the French writer Ronsard excelled in the handling of this form. However, the lyric found popular expression even in England. Sir Thomas White and the Earl of Surrey penned songs, lyrics, and sonnets. Some of the best songs were written and sung during this time. Even the Restoration period made its contribution to this form, although most of the lyrics produced during this time have not been able to survive the test of time. So here you look at the way back to centuries of the 7th century, and here the poets, had tried to look at that how this song, with this kind of musical instrument, to draw the attention from the listeners and to have that kind of expression of the emotional feelings, and to have that kind of whatever the poetic genius in the form of a poem with the hymns and psalms in the church. So like that, here the background of the church, religious background of the church, had this kind of touch of the spirituality. So there you see the Mozaratic poetry in Spain emerged simultaneously with the Latin lyric. So here you have seen that the way how components of the lyric and origin of lyric, and that how the lyrical form is making sense of the poetic genius and the creativity with the musical instrument, and how the religious background of the church had played vital role to say that how the Latin lyric emerged into its expression, so that one can understand how the lyric form of this background with this kind of whatever it's whatever the concerns of the poetry. The poets of the 18th century did not favor the lyric form except for Thomas Gray and William Collins, who contributed to the development and style of the lyric. So as we all know that the way how the lyric form has been moving through the centuries, and then in the 18th century it does not have that kind of interest in its expression, and then it was not popularized into its whatever the expression. So like that, here you see the way how a dramatic change was however brought about by the turn of the century, which witnessed a renewal of interest in the form. So lyric poetry was revived in a major way, and many English poets like Blake, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, Keats, Burns, and other manifested a keen and lively interest in writing lyrics. So this is what how the lyrical form of the origin has been keep on changing its identity in our literature, and each and every century has its own whatever the identity of its genre. So similarly, you can see that how it has been making sense of the lyrical qualities into its whatever the song like features reveals the emotions of a person. The writer of such poems may be considered a lyric poet, a lyricist, and medieval song expressed the feeling of the writer. Here you can see that the fowls in the frith, the fishes in the foot, and I moan wakes wood for best bone and blood. Therefore, the lyric may be summed as a short poem which deals with a single emotion, musical in quality, and with perhaps the features of word, music, and alliteration as an important component. So here you have seen that P.B. Shelley's "Oh, lift me as a wave, leaf, and cloud. I fall upon the thorns of my life. I bleed." So the way how persona is more, center of its expression. It's nothing but a self-exaltation. What though the field is lost, but the unconquerable will is not lost. In Paradise Lost, Satan's self-exaltation. So like that here, the center of the lyric is the persona to explore that emotions through the imagination and its whatever the background source of its expression. Yeah. Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Now we'll move to the Gothic. Next one, Gothic. Okay. Please come to the topic Gothic. Hello.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Please, anyone
Yes,
of you
sir.
read
Yes, sir, we are in.
first paragraph?
We are in.
Yes, sir.
It's
Yes, sir.
Gothic novels.
Yeah.
Introduction.
Please.
Gothic
Yeah.
fiction, also called Gothic horror, is a genre. It is a mode of literature which combines fiction, horror,
Gothic
and
novels,
romantic.
Gothic fiction, also called
Horace Walpole
Gothic
has introduced
horror,
it to English
is a
literature with his
genre.
novel
It
The
is a
Castle
mode of
of
literature
Otranto
which
in the year
combines
1764.
fiction, horror, and romanticism. Okay.
It was subtitled the second edition, A Gothic Story. Gothic fiction with romantic literary aspects was new at the time of Walpole's novel. The other long-standing features of the Gothic by Walpole included melodrama and parody. It originated in England in the mid-18th century and later in 19th century. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Edgar Allan Poe became well known. Another novel, Well Dracula. These stories take place in pseudo medieval. They are also so named because all these novels seem to take place in Gothic style architectures like castles, mansions, and abbeys. Gothic could also mean a particular style of art written in the form of novels, or could be paintings, or it could also refer to
అరవై
some
ఇయ్యాలా మీకు
magic
కొత్తిమీర ఉంటాయా ఒక 10 రూపాయలు
You want me to read the elements also, sir?
No. Stop. No, see here, one of the participants, please,
తెచ్చిస్తాను
mute your device, please. You are talking about your
70
personal
ఇస్తా
things also in the classroom. Hello? Yeah. So look at the way here the 19th century literature with its genres. Each and every genre has been emerging from the contemporary society. Here we have seen the background topics, and then we'll come to the Gothic novel. And here you see that it refers to the ancient, primitive, and magical. The term refers to the ancient, primitive, and magical, influenced by graveyard school of poetry. Gothic tales are closely related to the grotesque. The word comes
30
from Italian, in which language it means
సుక్కకూర ఉందా
caves.
ఎంత
Hello,
వద్దు 20కి
hello.
Sorry,
One of the
please
participants
mute all of us.
might be in market, and she is disturbing a lot with our personal. Hello,
Sir, please mute them all, sir.
see
Please.
please. Yeah. Please, the operator, have to mute all the participants' devices, please.
Sir, I think you can do it. You can do it, sir. You can mute everybody. Even Ramarao, sir,
Yeah. So
you
here,
have been in unmute mode, and we are having a lot of disturbance. Ramarao, sir, please mute yourself.
yeah. Please, mute your devices, please, participants. Since it is an online class, yeah. So here you have seen that the Gothic novel is with this kind of representation of the graveyard, and the use of language means caves. Here, when you look at that cave-like subconscious mind of human beings can and fulfill its craving for the macabre. So look at it explores the irrational or perverse nature of the human mind beyond the veneer of civilization. Germanic tribe called Goths. So here you can see that how it has been, with this kind of ancient, primitive, and magical references, and then it is associated with the Germanic or medieval terms. The concept is supposed to have been introduced in English literature in the 18th century by Horace Walpole, especially through his famous work, The Castle of Otranto, published in 1764. The word Gothic also included tendencies such as wildness, barbarity, and crudity. So here you look at that way how Gothic has been representing the way to look at its literary sources way back to centuries, and then here it has this kind of qualities have been popularized by exponents of the form as a reaction against the strictures of neoclassicism. So when you look at that irrational emotions and dark fantasy are characteristics of Gothic novel. See here, the characteristic features of Gothic novel are irrational emotions, dark fantasy. There are no any kind of rationality, only irrational. So when you look at that, the dark fantasy, the external scenery seemed an extension of the inner world of the darkness, psychic maladies. Physical power and moral indignation are the cause of an imbalanced state of being which the Gothic presents. So here it is the representation of dark side of whatever the scenery, and there you can see how it is with this kind of expression of its own.
I think Sari is not there in the class. Sar got disconnected.
Might be a technical problem.
Exactly.
Ramarao sir, can you please mute your
The one who has permission to do that, why don't you mute every one of us so that we all can be in the mute mode and listen to the class properly.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir. Yeah, sir.
Yes, sir.
So here, I got disconnected. Yeah, okay. Now we'll come to that how Gothic novel had this kind of background, and then we'll see that how it has the contribution by the other novelists. The Greek philosopher Longinus propounded this concept in the modern times. It is related to powerful emotions, especially spiritual ones. It concentrated on the enormous and massive natural order which was awe-inspiring from this evocation of awe to horror. It was supposed to have influenced by the Gothic form. Here you have seen that the Greek philosopher Longinus and how he had tried to conceptualize the Gothic with the powerful emotions, especially spiritual ones, and then they are with this kind of massive natural order which are inspiring. There you may see that kind of heart to horror. The elements of Gothic is sometimes contrasted with the sublime in order to heighten the fearful effect. Here you can see the adventure of the protagonist are hair-raising enough to induce sleepless nights in readers, but it seems to satisfy the need to work out some of the emotional excesses which Aristotle spoke about through the mode of tragedy. Hello? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
sir.
for instance, look at the drama of Shakespeare's with supernatural elements and witchcrafts, and how the tragic scenes draws our attention to generate the idea of horror and terrorizing moments always tries to draw our attention. So here it draws our attention to purify our life, our whatever the human concerns. So here in this Gothic novel also you can see that the way how it has this kind of elements. The setting of Gothic stories usually a very distant past, very often the medieval times, temporarily and spatially far removed from the present. So here the setting of the Gothic novel is very far away places from the present, and it deals with the past. The stories concentrate in foreign lands and strange surroundings. Popular setting for Gothic tales were the southern European Catholic countries. So look at how Gothic novel had the setting of its whatever the background of the past and far away places of the present, and how it has that kind of whatever the tales from the southern European Catholic countries. The incidents which made up the story were enacted in monasteries, ruined castles, dark and dreary dungeons, or frighteningly untamed mountainous terrains. So the incidents of the Gothic novel are all from this kind of dark sources of monasteries, ruined castles, dark and dreary dungeons, and it frightens you like anything. So you may not, feel free to see that dark monasteries, because it may terrorize you, it timid you, it generate that idea of purgation. But here you will see how it frightens you when you look at the incidents of the Gothic novel. Here characterized by elements of fantasy, how the characters are all into this kind of fantasy, and here the themes are suspense, mystery and supernatural. The Gothic novels are all with this kind of suspense, mystery and supernatural. So when you look at all these medieval settings includes uncanny, can be called Gothic. So here, when you look at the background of the Gothic novel, and it's whatever the setting, incidents, and it's thematic consensus are all with this kind of it's whatever the structure of the Gothic novel. You can see Bleak House by Charles Dickens and Absolved by William Faulkner. All these are into this. 19th century too had the influence of these romantics such as Coleridge. So when you look at the way how the Gothic novel characteristic features are all into this background, and Walpole's The Castle of Otranto was a pioneering work in the field. It finally established the Gothic tradition in English literature. So when you look at the way how Gothic novel revolves around 13th century incident of upspringing, murder, power struggle, and conflict interspersed with horror and mystery. So here, as we know that how it deals with this kind of dark monasteries, and the way how it terrorizes, timidits the audience when it is into this kind of dark side of the human life with the horror, violence, all these whatever the aspects of that setting and all. So here it is far away from the present. Then you can understand how it is with this kind of whatever its structure and themes, and then you can understand how Gothic elements had this kind of whatever the fiction oriented background to make use of multiple aspects into its existential whatever the reality. So the way how Gothic achieved its apotheosis in the creation of a new and important cultural phenomenon such as the compulsive grandiose heaven and hell defying Byronic hero. So when you look at all these, then you can understand Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus, published in 1818. All these all of that background. So like that, you can see how Gothic novel is into this kind of background of its whatever the literary features. Okay, so with this, I is will go to the another topic, the historical novel. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we'll
Yes,
go
Yes,
sir.
to the historical novel. Can anyone of you read a historical novel?
sir. Sorry to disturb you, sir.
Yeah,
Some of
please.
the students are unable to join the class. They are requesting a lot.
Actually, here,
The limit is
madam,
100
madam,
only, sir.
madam,
Yes, sir.
I am not the host, and then the operator will, allow as you were allowed by them, they will be allowed, madam.
Yes, sir.
Hello, I can't do that, madam, like that. Okay,
Oh,
so,
Yes, sir. What is the connection between both the ism and romantic system?
pardon, what is?
What is the connection between Buddhism and romantic system?
What is the connection? Romantics? What is? It's unclear.
Buddhism and romanticism. Romanticism
Romanticism.
and Gothicism. Gothicism.
So here, madam,
That,
see here, you can understand that how Gothic novel deals with that dark side of human life, and it has that kind of whatever the dreary and the frightening nature to see its whatever the literary features are all from the past. It always tries to look at the past with this kind of its identities, and then the way how the Gothic novel is the representation of its incidents, and the teen suspense, mystery, supernatural, elements. So here, when you look at the structure of the Gothic novel, with this kind of whatever its concerns and how it emerges from the past and to deal with its whatever the surroundings, strange surroundings, foreign lands, and the stories are all into this kind of settings. There you can see that they are far away from the present. So like that, you can understand the way how protagonist of this novel is an amoral, self-seeking villain, the son of a camp follower to Marlborough's army. So here the protagonist always with this kind of villainous characteristic features, always with that kind of dark, dreary, and then there is that kind of terrorization, timidness, and there you can understand how it is with this kind of whatever horror, terror, and dark side of the human life. So when you look at all these, then you can understand how this Gothic novel deals with this kind of characteristic features. Now we'll go to the another topic, that is historical novel. Can anyone of you read the historical novel, please?
Excuse me,
yes,
sir.
sir.
Excuse me, sir. The question was actually, how is romanticism connected to Gothism? So, what is the common points that connect romanticism with Gothism?
Yeah, so here you look at what is romanticism, you tell me. Yesterday we have seen that freedom of expression, individuality, age of reason. And here in Gothic novel, you can see that the characteristic features which are deal, with the past, and there you can see the characters are all from this kind of dark, and whatever the destroy, and then evil powers and villain, and there you can see its suspense, mystery, supernatural. When you look at the romantic age, it is making sense of nature rather than the whatever the other concerns of the Gothic novel. So here it is more with this kind of paradoxical nature of the romanticization, because here romantic age of reason deals with that kind of freedom of expression. It is with that kind of unconventionality, but whereas Gothic novels are all emerging from the past, and strange surroundings, foreign lands, and there you see the stories are all from this kind of background to terrorize and to look at that kind of whatever the monasteries, ruined castles, dark and dreary dungeons. So here you will see that kind of fact based background of the past. But the romantic age never and ever deals with that kind of fact based monasteries, ruined castles, dark and dreary dungeons. It always tries to look at the nature, freedom of expression, individuality, age of reason, and how they want to have that kind of liberty. But whereas in Gothic novel you will see that kind of past which does not have any kind of light, hope of ray, which does not have any kind of hope of survival. It has that kind of dark and dreary dungeons, and it may frighten you like anything. And here you may not have any kind of hope of survival, and there is no any kind of liberty of your own. And here you see that the way how the elements of fantasy in its characterization. So look at that way how you will
Excuse me,
see.
sir.
Yes.
I have a doubt. Sir, in exam we have to write whole poem if they will ask to write us, or else only stanza they could ask us, or else no
Of
need
which,
of any
of
written.
which topic, of which topic?
Any poem, sir. Like in history also we
See
are
here,
having.
the theme as well as the use of language and style, and here critical appreciation of the poem. You
Yes.
cannot write whatever you wish, according to the question only you have to attempt it. Otherwise you cannot have the relevance to answer the question. So here don't get confused with your preoccupied thought that no, it is a generalization of your answer. Okay, so whatever
Yes.
the question will be asked, you attempt that with the relevance answer. So here what is Gothic novel and what is lyric? So can you give an example of a lyrical poem, and what is sonnet? So when you look at here, the question is focused on the genre, poetic
Okay,
genre,
genre.
okay, style.
Okay.
So like that we will discuss in next class. That will let me finish whatever the next topic. We'll come to the historical
Sir,
novels.
sir,
Yes,
what
yes.
are the futures of Gothism, sir?
Pardon.
What are the futures of Gothism?
కొంచెం ఎక్కువ ఉంది మమ్మీ
Madam, Gothic novel already
మనం దీన్ని ఇట్లా పెట్టి
you're not hello madam, hello, you're not no, yeah.
85% ఉంది.
హలో ఏంటండి, హలో మేడం, ఎవరో వాళ్ళు మ్యూట్ చేయండి. హలో, can you hear me? Madam, so here I told no madam, Gothic novel features and all I told you didn't listen properly it seems. No, hello madam.
Sir, can you repeat small final,
Yeah.
sir?
Okay. So here Gothic novel deals with the distant past, very often the medieval times, temporarily and spatially far removed from the present. Okay, the stories concentrates on foreign lands, strange surroundings. I already told all these, and incidents from the enacted in monasteries, ruined castles, dark and dreary dungeons, frightening, untamed mountains. Characters are all,
Spellings
fantasy.
నేర్చుకోండి స్పెల్లింగ్స్ ప్రతి ఆన్సర్ స్పెల్లింగ్స్ నేర్చుకో
So here
ఓకే
you look at, hello.
Yes,
Yes, sir, we are able to hear you. Come on.
So please, see, look at, I told already, the Gothic explores the irrational or perverse nature of the human mind beyond the veneer of civilization. So here it exposes the barbarian status of human mind. Can you understand this? Hello.
Yes, sir, we are able to understand.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We are able
So
to.
here, how it is quite against to civilization. It deals with the dark side of human life. There you may not see any kind of rationality. You will see only irrational. Okay. So you are looking at that whatever the dreary, dark dungeon, frightening mountains, all these are all whatever its concerns of the Gothic center, whatever the irrational and the perverse nature of the human mind. So look at the characteristic features are all into this kind of Gothic tradition, to some extent institutionalized the world of nightmares. So here you will see it is a nightmare. It is with the dark fantasy. It is with the kind of dreary dungeons and frightening timidness. You will see that kind of all these features into its presentation. So like that you can see how it is with the Shakespeare's dramas, supernatural elements, witchcrafts and all, no. So like that in this Gothic novel you can see all these features. Now shall I move to another topic? Hello.
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah. So is it clear the difference between the Romantic age as well as the Gothic novel?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah. Now please, anyone of you read historical novel, please.
Historical
A
novel.
historical
A
novel
historical
is
novel
one
is
that conveys
one
the
that
spirit,
conveys the
manners,
spirit,
and social
manners,
conditions of a past age with realistic details to historical fact. Roger Doytoller writes in The Plain Man and the Novel. The historical novel is an attempt to reconstruct the atmosphere, the habits of the thought, the prevailing psychology of a generation with which the writer has had no intimate contact. Mr. Stoddart that a historical novel is a contraction in terms and adds fiction is the underlying basis of the novel, fact is the underlying basis of history. The historical novel apparently becomes a novel by virtue of departure from history, and in so far as it is a history, it is less than perfect as a history.
Yeah. So here, what is history? Yes, please. What is history, sir?
Something about the past.
Okay, it is the chronology. Okay, it deals with the kind of whatever the history of a century or culture or tradition. So when you look at the form of fictional narrative to reconstruct the history. So here the narration of a story and any kind of thing will reconstruct the history, and it has that kind of imaginative recreation and reenactment of history. So way back 2 centuries, anything related to the past, and it could be any kind of civilization. There you see that the whatever the identity of that historical background deals with that kind of characters are into fiction. So here when you look at all these, that the novelists of this historical novel are all making sense of the portray history as realistically as possible. So when you look at the historical novel of several centuries or generations before the time of its composition, it is an endeavor to portray as closely as possible the traditions and ethos of historical age. So here, look at the way how the protagonist may be real or fictional, and he experiences conflict in the framework of the larger historical dimension. For instance, if you look at Tippu Sultan or any kind of dynasty or duke, there you see that history with this kind of background, and the historical novel will reconstruct of the past with the imagination. Here, Maria Edgeworth's Castle Rackrent is assumed to be the first illustration of a fully developed historical novel in English. Here we have the J. Porter's The Scottish Chiefs, Walter Scott's novels, especially Waverley, William Thackeray's Vanity Fair, Charles Dickens' Barnaby Rudge, and Tale of Two Cities, as well as Orgz's The Scarlet Pimpernel. So when you look at all these novels from this kind of historical background, that how history has been reconstructed and recreated into its narration. So when you look at the background of the historical novel, there you see that how the narration is making sense of the past to recreate the popularity of that historical background. For the first time in English fiction, we witness in his novels characters who are influenced by the historical and political environment. So, for instance, Sir Walter Scott's, here we have seen that Waverley and Thackeray's Vanity Fair, and then you see that how all these novelists are into that kind of background. The story of Waverley is that of a youthful Edward Waverley who fantasizes about achieving love, respect, and fidelity. Therefore, he proceeds to enlist himself in the Hanoverian army. So here you can see that whatever way back to centuries, and it is not able to see or available to the present generation. Then the novelist may look at that whatever the history from that kind of background. For instance, whatever the historical novel White Mughal by William Dalrymple. Look at our Women's College, Koti, Usmania University Women's College, that Darbar Hall. If you look at that, the way how the novel deals with that kind of, White Mughal, and the, novelist had tried to, bring to our notice that the way back to centuries of the British empires, with this kind of historical monument, to understand how this historical novel deals with that kind of history, and to recreates and re-establishes that whatever the concerns of that contemporary age. So when you look at all these, then you can understand here the historical novel from this kind of point of view. The reader's focus by the end of the novel is arrested by the image of losses like the brave chief Fergus MacIvor and Baron of Bradward Dine, who is an idealist and an eccentric character. So here you look at how historical novel deals with this kind of past chronologically, and how it recreates, re-establishes the past with this kind of romantic ideas are subjected to rigors of hard testing and found to be inadequate in substance. So here, when that historical novel with this kind of background, then we can understand how we may feel personally that we do not have the opportunity to see the Mughal Empire. That means the way back to centuries of that British empires, or that could be their whatever the tradition and culture. But if it is recreated, regenerating re-establishing the idea of white Mughal during that kind of colonial time. Then you can see that William Dalrymple's white Mughal is making sense of that recreation and the re-establishing the idea of the history, this kind of historical novel. So when you look at all these then you can understand how the historical novels are all into this kind of background to have that kind of whatever its identities, to look at how the novel with the history. Novel maybe a fiction, but it deals with the history. It is the infusion of fiction and fact. So history as a fiction, fiction as history. So here in English fiction, we witnessed the novels, with this kind of background of the historical and political environment. So like that, if you will see that Waiting for Mahatma, and our Rabindranath Tagore's, as well as the other novelists, they had tried to touch the history of that nationalism and all. So here you can see the historical novel from this kind of background to understand all the whatever the elements of fiction and recreation, regeneration, re-establishment of the past. So when you look at William Thackeray's Vanity Fair, published in 1947-48, it is a depiction of the time of Napoleonic Wars. The novelist paints a satirical picture of worldly people as a comment about the materialistic leanings of his contemporaries. The story contrasts the fortunes of two young women, Rebecca Sharp and Amelia Sedley. The only point in common between them is that they are both educated at Miss Pinkerton's Academy for Young Ladies. Rebecca is the child of poor parents, while Amelia is the daughter of a rich city merchant. Here you can see the male characters, George, Rawdon, and Dobbin are in the army, and the Battle of Waterloo is described in detail. So here you will see the backdrop serves to highlight the intrigues of love and lust, which the characters indulge in the novel to depict the hypocritical manners of his times in a satirical style. So look at that William Dalrymple's White Mughal is also from this kind of background. So here then the historical novel is making sense of the fiction and reality, and regenerating, recreating, re-establishing that whatever the way back to centuries history into the fiction. So with this I say that this topic is over, and then we'll move to the another topic that is pre-Raphaelite. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sir?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Sir.
Yeah. Shall we move to another topic, please?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the next topic?
The pre-Raphaelite movement.
The introduction to the poem.
No. Of
Introduction
this
to the poem.
introduction to the poem.
Pre-Raphaelite, sir.
The pre-Raphaelite movement.
Okay. First unit only, no? This one is?
Yes, sir. It is the first unit.
Yeah, please, read. Any one of you read, please, this topic. Hello?
Dante Gabriel Rossetti in the mid-19th century initiated the pre-Raphaelite movement. It was originally not a literary movement, but a literary one. Rossetti himself was a painter and a poet was as well. He expressed that contemporary paintings had become very formal, academic, and unrealistic. Raphael wanted to see that it is taken back to the realism, cynicism, and devotion that the one that characterizes the art of the Italian painters before him. Raphael was indeed an excellent and noted painter of his day. He led some painter organized in London in 1848, which came to be called the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Apart from Rossetti, were important members of this group such as William Holman Hunt, John Millett, Thomas Woolner, and James Collins broke the shackles of stereotyped traditions. They brought about a great effect, a return to nature, by giving up the bulk of traditionalized sportification that had been piled up over the centuries after Raphael. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood was an entire otherness of simplicity of art.
Hello.
Sir, we can hear you, sir.
Yeah. So here, look at the term pre-Raphaelite. It was originated from Rome. It was a society founded by two German painters, Cornelius and Overbeck. So look at the term, which was derived, from Rome, and here the origination, and then how it was founded by the two persons, German painters, Cornelius and Overbeck. It was called the German Pre-Raphaelite Brethren. It derived its name from the Italian painters before Raphael, who inspired the movement and in whom was found a sweetness, depth, and sincerity of devotional feeling, a self-forgetfulness, and humble adherence to truth, which were absent from the sophisticated art of Raphael and his successors. So here you will see that how it's origin from this kind of historical background. In England, a Free Raphaelite fraternity was started in 1848 by young and talented painters D.G. Rossetti, J. Millais, and W.H. Hunt, some of the other who subsequently joined the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. So there you see, Rossetti, Woolner, and Frederick, George, Stephen, all of them are here into its association. These young artists were concerned about formulating a common doctrine for themselves, which would free them of the artificiality of the technical skill and the waning inspiration behind all art. So here their interest in genuine appreciation of beauty and not artistry. They believe that much service could be rendered to art by making it steeped in faith and having complete devotion to art above all other considerations. So here their concern is that nothing but what art for art's sake, art for art's sake. So art for human sake. So here we believe that art should serve the purpose of the society. If it serves the purpose of only art for art's sake, it fails. So here when you look at that kind of whatever the Pre-Raphaelites concerns related to the art, and then how their contribution into the painting, so in literature, to they advocated a close and careful study of nature and return to the style and ethos of the early Italian artists. So like that here, when you look at these young pre-Raphaelite poets are all with this kind of art for art's sake, and the moment they had to look at to have the concerns of the art as well as the faith in the explorations of its whatever the existential reality. So when you look at that, the movement was strongly literary, although it originated in painting and other art forms, is illustrated by the fact that the members started a journal called The Germ to explore the theoretical dimension of the movement. So when you look at this kind of whatever the background, then they had tried to express their desire to do away with the ugliness that characterized contemporary life by purifying art and revolutionizing it. So here you see that there whatever the concern of the art to revolutionize and to see that perception people's perception about the nature of art and its pursuit. So here they themselves, had tried to look at that the people's perception and the nature of about the nature of art and its pursuit. So here Frida Flights had tried to look at that whatever the art and its purpose and how people's perception towards the nature of art and its pursuit. So this is what the Frida Flight movement had emerged with this kind of whatever the contemporary background of that age, and we'll see that important exponents of Frida Flight movement. Here we have Dante, Gabriel Rossetti, and here we have that kind of whatever the aspects of the Frida Flight movement to understand how they had that kind of whatever the defense of the poetic genius or whatever the art into its whatever expression. So the important representative literary figure of the pre-Raphaelite movement is William Morris. We have seen Gabriel Rossetti, and then we have that the another person into pre-Raphaelites, and his name is known very popular, and he has been trying to say that primitive painting as the basis of his imagination. So here, when you look at the difference between Dante, Gabriel Rossetti's perception of the art and painting, and here William Morris, when you see that Pre-Raphaelites had that kind of whatever the primitive painting background and way how they looked at the poetry, poetic form, and how they portrayed the beauty and their fables and their chivalric tales of adventure are all into this to hello.
Yes, sir, we are able to hear you.
Yeah. So here, you have seen that the pre-Raphaelite poets and their whatever concerns of the primeval painting, and then here how they portrayed that kind of nature or art into there. And we'll see Pre-Raphaelites are like the romantic, draw inspiration from the romance, chivalry and superstitions of the Middle Ages. Here we have Saint Agnes and Keats, and then chronologically an earlier composition. So we look at that 19th century with Sainsbury states that return of the school was to be a medievalism different from the tentative and scrappy medievalism of Percy. From the way back to centuries, how the Pre-Raphaelite poets have been trying to look at the art for art's sake, and here art was their religion. Art was their religion. So when you look at the way how Pre-Raphaelites had tried to look at that their aim and craft are aimed at perfection in both form and expression. So the Pre-Raphaelite, whatever the poetic art, creativity, had the craftness with the perfection in both form and expression. So here you will see that how Pre-Raphaelites had that kind of primitive painting of art and the inspiration of the nature, and their whatever the craft and aim towards the perfection of the form and expression of the poetry. So it is with the vividness, lucid, and that kind of presentation which makes the sense of the scene and local, including the fine eye for detail and prevalence of rich imagery. So here you can see that the Free Raphaelites had this kind of background to its presentation. So this is what you can understand how. Hello. Yeah. So you way how the art for art's sake and art was their religion, and how they aimed at that craftness of the expression form with the perfection. So here in their expression, their vividness, lucidity, and crystal clear ideas to understand that Pre-Raphaelites with this kind of background, and then you can understand how they depict beauty for its own sake. So it is the representation of uncorrupted nature of expression. It never and ever mismatches with the reality. It always constructs the exactness of the reality in its form and expression. So the poet is more careful in its presentation with this kind of whatever the aspects of art for art's sake. So here look at the statement of Legois that vowels call to vowels and consonant to consonants. These links often seem stronger than the links of thought or imagery. So here, when you look at that, the way to understand art for art's sake with lucidness, vividness, crystal clear form and expression, to say that vowels call to vowels and consonants, these links often seem stronger than the links of thought or imagery. So here the Pre-Raphaelites had tried to look at the form and expression with that kind of exactness of its whatever the reality. So here the chief focus of the Pre-Raphaelites was to primarily revive an element that was already exists in an earlier period of history. So when you look at Pre-Raphaelite movement with this kind of whatever the distinct mark and its contribution towards the literature, as well as its whatever the background with this kind of art for art's sake. So here the way how Pre-Raphaelite poets had tried to look at the art for art's sake without any kind of corruption and mismatch, and they say that here art was their religion, or because art for art's sake, they never and ever compromise with any aspect of their passion, because they want to construct the idea of the art and form of expression exactly to show the perfection and craftness in their whatever the vivid concept and presentation of scene and whatever its prevalence of its rich imagery. So like that, here you can understand how Pre-Raphaelites had that kind of whatever the background of the primitive painting as the basis of his of their imagination. So here they may have the past primitive source, but they never and ever compromise with the art artistic reality and its presentation. So here Free-Raphaelites have that kind of their uncompromised nature to constitute that kind of spontaneous exercise with that no conscious effort in the direction. That means you can understand how they had that kind of expression of the poetic genius and the creativity with this kind of vowel to vowel, consonant to consonant, no matter of other aspects of its whatever the links of thought and imagery. So this is what exactness of their poetic genius and creativity shows, that how it is making sense of their poetry with this kind of background. So here we'll move to the another topic, that is expansion of the empire. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. No, shall we move to another topic, please, now?
Sir, it is 11, sir, already.
So shall we stop here now? Otherwise.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir, in the next class we can.
Okay. Acha, in next unit, what do you have the topics? Can you?
Next topic that we have to discuss is William Wordsworth.
Chintan Abbey, sir. Wordsworth, Prelude, Book 1.
Chintan Abbey, Wordsworth, Prelude, Book 1. Coleridge, Kubla Khan. Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Shelley to Skylar. Shelley, The Ode, The West Wind. Keats' Ode is to a Nightingale. Keats' Ode on Grecian one.
Okay, fine. So we'll see tomorrow the next unit. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.